Let me set the scene. Everyone's about to die, as usual. Whether the reactor's melting down or radiation waves coming, the ship won't fly. It doesn't really matter because on the 100, the world ending is just any other Tuesday. But everyone's about to die, nobody knows what to do, and then, like the majestic creature that she is, Raven Reyes limps into frame and saves the day. Whether she's got the busted leg or a fried brain, it doesn't really matter because she's able to build the thing and hack the system and get everyone home safely. And then the episode ends and the fandom goes right back to talking about Clark and Bellamy. But no, really. If you actually sit down and track who was responsible for humanity surviving across the 7 seasons of the show, it's almost always Raven Reyes, and she is, in my opinion, the most important character on the 100, and we generally do not talk about her enough. But this video isn't just a Raven is underrated video, because the more I rewatch, the more I notice something going on that just didn't sit right with me. Yes, Raven saves everyone, every season without fail. But the way the show gets her to do that, it breaks her, over and over and over again. Every season finds a new way to put this woman through literal hell, and every time she pushes through and we cheer and the writers go, okay, what can we do to her next season? So that's what I want to talk about today. Not just how Raven Reyes saved the world, but what the show took from her in exchange. Because at some point, Unbreakable stops being a compliment and starts being her character description. This is the cost of being Raven Reyes. For those of you who haven't seen the show, The 100 is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi show that ran on the CW from 2014 to 2020. The premise is that there's a nuclear apocalypse that wiped out most of life on Earth, and the remaining survivors have been living on a space station called the Ark for about 100 years. The Ark, however, is running out of air, so the leader sent 100 juvenile delinquents down to the ground to see if Earth is survivable. The show really escalates from there, and at its core, it's about survival at all costs and the moral compromises people have to make in order to keep their people alive. The main character is Clark Griffin, and a lot of the central tension is built around her leadership and the impossible decisions that she has to make. And while Clark makes the decisions, Raven is the one who makes them possible. But before we get there, you need to understand where Raven started, because her backstory is one of the most heartbreaking on the show, and it sets up everything about who she is. Raven grew up on Mecha Station, and her father was never in the picture, and her mother was an alcoholic who would trade Raven's food rations for moonshine. The only person who ever showed up for her was Finn Collins, the boy next door. He shared his rations with her, remembered her birthdays, and for all intents and purposes, was really her only family. They eventually start dating, and by the time the show begins, they've been together for seemingly years. Now, in season 2, we get flashbacks that fill in more of her story. We learn that Raven became the youngest zero-G mechanic in Ark history, but she had a really small heart murmur that disqualified her from doing actual spacewalks in case she, died out there. So for her 18th birthday, Finn surprises her by setting up an illegal spacewalk so she can finally experience what it feels like to be in zero gravity. Of course, it goes wrong. They burn through 3 months of oxygen, which on the Ark is a crime punishable by death. Raven, having just turned 18, would be executed, or floated, as they call it. But Finn is still 17, so he takes the fall, so he just gets sent to juvenile detention. And that's how Finn also ended up as one of the 100 kids sent down to Earth. Now, imagine being Raven, the one person who has ever given a damn about you, the person who sacrificed his freedom for you and is now potentially being used as a guinea pig for a planet that might still be radioactive. You'd probably feel guilty, and you'd want to do something about it. So, Raven, in a span of about a week, refurbishes the 100-year-old escape pod and launches herself alone down to Earth. And she nearly dies on re-entry. And what does she find when she lands? Finn's in love with Clark! And yes, Finn sucks, he's the worst, I hate him, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Anyway, we later see Finn spiral in season 2 as he massacres an entire village of grounders while he's trying to find Clark. He turns himself in, and Clark kills him as a mercy kill to spare him from being tortured to death by the grounders. And Raven just has to stand there and watch the only family she's ever known die by the hand of the woman he cheated on her with. And that happens in the middle of season 2, so that's really where her arc on the show starts from. Grief, abandonment, and betrayal. And the show just builds from there. So here's what makes Raven different from everyone else on the show. She's not really a fighter in the traditional sense. She's a mechanic and engineer, but yet she's still somehow the most dangerous person in every room she walks into. Because Raven's weapon is her brain, and that brain saves everyone constantly. Season 1. Raven lands on the ground, and within days she's able to build a radio so the 100 can communicate with the Ark. She builds walkie-talkies, bullets, bombs, grenades, and in the season finale, when the grounders are closing in and the kids are completely outnumbered, Raven's able to figure out how to rig the dropship's rockets to ignite and incinerate the attacking army, all while bleeding out from a gunshot wound because Murphy shot her. In Season 2, Raven now has permanent nerve damage in her leg from that gunshot, and she's in constant pain. She can barely walk, yet she's still also able to figure out Mount Weather is jamming their communications. She's able to help disable the acid fog so Bellamy can move freely inside Mount Weather, and she goes with Wick to cut the power to the dam. She of course gets captured by one of the head Mount Weather guys and has bone marrow drilled out of her without anesthesia, I might add. Season 3 is the Allie chip storyline, and Raven's chronic pain makes her a target. The chip promises to take all your pain away, and Raven, who has been in agony for 2 seasons, takes it because who can blame her? But she realizes the chip is erasing her memories, including her memories of Finn. She then becomes the only person who actively resists Allie's control. She thinks of the idea of how to use the wristbands as an EMP so that the others can surgically remove the chip from the back of her own neck. And then she's the one who figures out that the second AI, which they call the Flame, is the key to stopping Allie for good. All of this while Allie keeps hijacking her body and trying to kill her. Season 4 is when there's a radiation death wave coming, and Raven's able to figure out how to keep people alive at Arcadia by rationing and creating reinforcements. And when Clark and Bellamy run out of time to make it to the bunker, it's Raven who fixes up a rocket to get them all to space. But here's the thing about Season 4. The leftover code from the Allie chip is literally killing her. She's hallucinating and having seizures, and anytime she pushes her brain too hard, she's on the floor. And there's a really incredible moment where Raven decides to end her own life, because who is she without her brain? But then she's able to hallucinate Sinclair, who was a mentor and father figure to her, who also died, and he tells her to keep fighting. Raven then comes to the conclusion that she's not choosing pain, she chooses life. She then submerges herself in an ice bath, stopping her own heart to reboot her brain and purge the remaining code, and then she brings herself back to life. Then she's like crawling to the radio and she's like, "This is Raven Reyes, and I'm alive." Oh, holy cinema. Then we get to Season 5, and now our crew's been 6 years in space with Bellamy, Murphy, Amori, Echo, Harper, and Monty. She's able to keep the ship running for 6 years, and when they get back to the ground, she's able to fly the leadership. She figures out how to remove the prisoner's shock collars, and in the finale when McCreary drops a bomb that destroys what's left of Earth, Raven launches the ship and saves everyone yet again. Season 6, they're in a new planet, but she keeps piloting, troubleshooting, and doing what she always does. And then Season 7 is the final season, and Raven's able to figure out the Disciples technology. She's able to guide her friends across planets, and ultimately takes a test that determines whether humanity gets to survive. After Clark, fails it. And alongside Octavia, she saves all of humanity. So every single season, there is a moment where everyone would have died if not for Raven and her brain. And yet, when people talk about the 100, she's almost never the first name out of their mouth. So just give my girl her credit, okay? Okay, and here's where this video shifts a bit. Because now I want to look at that exact same list, but instead of asking, what did Raven accomplish? I want to ask, what did it take from her? Because that list is also, she got shot, she got operated on, she had bone marrow drilled out of her, she got mind controlled, she had brain damage, she had to kill herself and revive herself, she got tortured, she got beaten. I mean, every single season, the writers found a new way to break Raven Reyes. And every single season, the story beat was the same. Watch her suffer, watch her push through. Be amazed, reset, repeat. And at some point, you just have to ask, were the writers respecting her resilience, or were they addicted to it? Because there's a real difference between a show that says, this character is strong because she overcomes adversity, and a show that says, this character's purpose is to have adversity to overcome. And I think the 100 started as the first one, but gradually drifted into the second. The fandom literally had to coin the phrase, stop hurting Raven, because the audience could see the pattern even when the writers seemingly couldn't. And I have 2 things to say about this, but they also kind of contradict each other. Stay with me. So the first thing is that the way the show handled Raven's disability was, in some ways, genuinely brave. because her leg never heals. The show doesn't give her a miracle cure. From season 2, episode 1, all the way to the series finale, she's wearing that brace. And in a post-apocalyptic show where the characters are constantly running for their lives, having a lead who can't run is a difficult thing to write around, and I think a lot of shows would have found a way to magic it away by the end of season 2. But the 100 didn't. The Allie chip arc is honestly the most interesting reflection of this because the chip was the closest thing to a cure she ever got, and it cost her her memories and her free will, and she ultimately rejects it, choosing pain over losing herself. So props to the CW for letting a character with a permanent disability be a hero from start to finish without curing her and without making her tragedy of being shot her whole personality. That's meaningful representation, especially for the chronic pain and disability community, and I don't want to undersell it. But the second thing is that at a certain point, I stopped being inspired by what Raven endured and started being uncomfortable with how much the show needed her to endure. Because the way the show treated her body and her mind was like a well that the writers kept coming back to whenever they needed to up the stakes. And my honest read is that this was because the show did not know what to do with Raven when she wasn't in crisis. Because if you were to think about it for a second, what does Raven Reyes' story look like in an episode where there's no emergency for her to solve? Clark gets leadership dilemmas and philosophical debates about morality. Octavia gets identity arcs and entire seasons built around her transformation. Bellamy gets to wrestle with loyalty and ideology. And Raven gets another injury and another impossible technical problem. She's the fixer, and the show locked her into that role so tightly that the only way they knew how to create stakes for her was to break things, including her. And I think this connects to something bigger about how television writes strong female characters, and particularly strong women of color, because there's this tendency in genre TV to prove a woman is tough by putting her through hell and showing her survive it, instead of just giving her depth, range, breathing room, and joy. Also, I don't think the writers did this maliciously. I think they genuinely loved Raven as a character, and Lindsay Morgan's performance was so good at selling this pain and perseverance cycle that became the thing they kept coming back to. Because when you have an actress who can make you cry and cheer in the same scene, it's tempting to keep writing scenes that let her do that. But the result is a character who never gets to just exist, to be happy for more than 5 minutes, or to have a storyline that isn't built on top of her own suffering. Now, this also isn't a Raven Reyes did nothing wrong video, because she's not perfect, and honestly one of the more interesting parts of her arc is the way the show eventually confronts that. Throughout the series, Raven has this moral superiority thing going on. For multiple seasons, she's openly critical of Clark for making decisions that get people killed. Her position is always that there was a better way. You didn't have to do that, you chose to let people die. And sometimes she had a point, but it was easy for her to say that because she was never the one making those decisions. She built the tools, but she didn't have to decide who to aim them at. That's a very different kind of pressure, and the show eventually makes her feel it. In season 7, the nuclear reactor on Sanctum is melting down, and Raven is the one in charge. She enlists some of the Legis prisoners to be welders to go in and fix it, but isn't completely honest about how dangerous it is. The repairs get done and the Sanctum is saved, but people die, including a man named Hatch. And Raven is devastated. She is so overwhelmed with guilt that when Hatch's wife attacks her, she just takes it. She lets herself be beaten up because she feels like she deserves it. And this is when it hits her. She doesn't get to be Miss Morality anymore. The moment is pretty big for her character because for once it doesn't feel like the show is punishing Raven, but completing her in some way. She finally understands what Clark has been carrying this whole time, the weight of being the one who has to decide. And later on, there's a really sweet bonding moment between the two where Raven asks Clark how she's able to handle the weight of all that decision making, because she gets it now. And the other thing I love about Raven is just that she's cocky. Raven Reyes knows that she's the smartest person in the room, and she will not let you forget it, and I love it. Because she's not arrogant in a way that puts other people down, but she just forms these little rivalries and partnerships with these other engineers. She respects the craft and the people who share it. But she also knows her worth. She takes up space, and she does not apologize for it. And in the show where she's pretty much the only woman we ever see in this mechanic engineer role, that matters. She's not the quiet, humble genius who downplays her abilities, but she's a Latina woman in STEM who tells you she's brilliant because she is. I want to mention one more thing briefly because I'd be lying if I said it didn't bug me. After everything Raven went through with the absent father, alcoholic mother, Finn's betrayal, and subsequent death, a lot of us wanted to see her fall in love and actually get to keep it. And the show kept almost giving her that and then taking it away. Right, like Finn cheated and died. Wick disappeared between seasons when the actor had to leave the show. Shaw was killed off because the second they landed on a new planet, the actor got cast on another show. Now, to be fair, the Wick and Shaw exits weren't intentional. Actors leave, so writers have to adapt. So unlike, some other characters from other shows, I'm not going to pretend the writers were sitting in a room going, let's keep Raven single and alone. But I do wish we would have gotten to see one sustained on-screen love story that wasn't squeezed into these margins between disasters. Because Raven Reyes deserved to be loved and have someone who stayed and deserved to be soft and happy for longer than 5 minutes. So where do I land with Raven Reyes? Well, when people talk about the 100, the conversation usually centers right on Clark, the leader who made the impossible decisions. Bellamy, the heart of the group. Octavia, the girl who became a warrior. And those are all great characters with incredible arcs. But Raven is the one who made it all possible. And she does it while carrying more pain, physical and emotional, than everyone else on the show. She does it with a bum leg and a scarred brain and a heart that's been broken so many times that she should have stopped letting people in a long time ago. But she didn't, and she kept going, kept building, kept saving everyone. And then, at the very end, when the literal fate of the human race comes down to a test, and Clark fails it because she killed Cadigan, it's Raven who steps up and takes the test. And she doesn't pass it through violence or power, but by being who she is. Someone who has suffered, who has made mistakes, who carries guilt, but who never stopped believing humanity was worth saving. And then when the rest of humanity transcends and becomes part of some cosmic consciousness, Raven chooses to return to human form so Clark doesn't have to live alone. Now, how do we get from this to this? You just have to be there. So here's where I am. I love Raven Reyes. I love her confidence, her brain, her resilience, her refusal to quit. I love that she's a Latina woman in STEM who's cocky and brilliant and disabled and never once apologizes for taking up space. I love that she saved everyone every season and that the show ended with her being the one worthy of speaking for all of humanity. But I also think the show failed her. It called her unbreakable and then used that as permission to keep trying to break her. It gave her crises after crises, but never gave her breathing room, never the quiet moments of joy that exist outside of survival. Because being unbreakable was never the goal, it was just what she had to be because the show wouldn't let her be anything else. Raven Reyes deserved to be more than the strongest person in the room. She deserved the chance to be the happiest too. Thank you all so much for sticking with me to the end of this video. The script definitely a little bit harder to write because I kept wanting to go on tangents with how much Finn sucks and how I hate him. But hey, I think I showed pretty good restraint. But yeah, definitely let me know in the comments who were some of your favorite characters from the 100 and what were your thoughts on Raven. And as the kids say, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.